by. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Week 9 features a blackout in College Station as the Tigers head on to take on the Aggies. We've got trash talk coming out of Baton Rouge. Another question of just how loud Kyle Field is. I think the Tigers might have poked the bear once again. Home team has won the last 6 games in this series. We'll see if that streak continues. The Middies host Notre Dame at MetLife Stadium. Can Navy spoil Notre Dame's playoff chances? We'll talk about that. And Missouri heads to Tuscaloosa to take on maybe the most lackluster Alabama team that we've seen since 2007. Can the Tigers, down a quarterback, find a way to win it on the road? We'll talk about that and much more here on The Three Technique, a college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes, along with Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney. I'm Mitch Mason. Glad to have you with us. Fellas, I was talking before we hit record that it feels like we're due for kind of a chalky week in college football. Take that however you want, but it feels like with all the chaos, everything going the way of the underdog, the road team, what have you, it feels like we're due for a week where the favorites get the job done on the road and the home teams hold serve.
I could see that, but I could also counter with it feels like 2007, the most that it's felt like since 2007. I have to go back and look and see if we actually had a chalk week in 2007. I'm sure there was at some point. I'm sure there wasn't a seismic upset every single week, right? But I mean, as a fan of Texas A&M, they're favored by the spread this week, so I can take chalk. I'll take chalk this week if that means we win.
Yeah, if it's going to be a chalk weekend, that's what it might seem like, and might feel like we're kind of due for one of those. However, this is kind of like that thing where it says no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. It's like no one expects the big upset weekend. Right when we thought we'd get kind of a normal weekend, here's the precursor to that, the preview, the warning. It's going to be nice and chalk, and then we can go ahead and hit the montage of all the upsets. That's kind of what we're in for, I think.
Plenty of opportunity for upset this week, no doubt about it. There's some large spreads. We'll get into that as we talk about our big 3, get into Saturday storylines, break those down conference by conference. But, of course, if you are new or a regular to the show, you haven't hit subscribe yet, we would love if you would do that over on the podcast side, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. Give us a follow, a subscription. It's free, and it helps grow the show. Leave a comment on which game you're watching the most this week, which storyline you're looking forward to. We'd love to interact with you in the comments at 3TechPod on social media as well. Number 8, LSU on the road at number 14, Texas A&M. The Aggies are 2.5-point favorites. This is at 6:30 p.m. on ABC, the primetime game of the week in the Southeastern Conference. And guys, I mentioned off the top that the home team has won the last 6 games in this series. So if the Aggies are hold serve, they're favored to win this one. As we dove into the notes and talked about the stats and X factors, it became very clear that these two teams are separated by the thinnest of margins. LSU may be ranked 8th, A&M may be ranked 14th, but both of these teams do certain things very well. Sometimes they struggle with certain aspects of it. I think the quarterback play is certainly something that's going to draw a lot of eyes in this game, but both of these teams really separated by a razor's edge, which certainly makes for an entertaining football game.
Yeah, these teams are almost identical when you really think about it. I mean, they both have week 1 losses that, are kind of embarrassing, followed up by just kind of rattling off a bunch of wins, sometimes convincingly, sometimes not so convincingly, where, both teams felt like they should have probably played better. Both teams have a great pass rush. Both teams get after the passer. Both teams have some issues in the secondary. A&M gives up some of the big plays. LSU sometimes plays a little soft in zone. A&M probably has the edge in the run game. I think the Moss Daniels tandem is a little bit better. But I think LSU probably has the nod on the quarterback play. If for nothing else, then I think Nussmeier's been more consistent to this point in the season. Now, Wigman, he does have the ability to go off, and part of this does have to do with, and I'm going to bring up this stat now, from PFF, LSU has a 40% pressure rate, but that might actually play into some of Connor's strengths. He has an 81 PFF grade under pressure, which is 4th in the country, but a 56.3 grade with a clean pocket, which is 3rd worst. So that maybe rushing the passer and having that as one of your strengths on defense isn't quite going to be the recipe for LSU. It's going to come down to, I think, Connor Wigman being able to compete against the pressure, be able to stand in there, find those spots in the zone, be able to complete some passes and to move the football, keep them honest, right? So you can kind of, keep the run game going if you're A&M. That's really where the strength of the offense is, bread and butter. Flip side, if Nussmeier has one of those games, then it may not matter what A&M does on the offensive side. They may not be able to keep up.
Yeah, I think both of these quarterbacks really thrive when they have a very clear hot route or a very clear throw or scheme. It's schemed to one place, right? And that's not saying anything radical for most college quarterbacks, but it was really on display for Nuss last week against Arkansas. He was 1 of 10 for just 10 yards on throws, 10 plus yards down the field in the first half. Didn't see a stat for how that played out in the second half, but I don't remember a lot of big plays down the field for him. And that's really kind of been his bread and butter throughout the season. I really think that Connor Wigman, the key to this one is him just taking care of the football and not turning the ball over and setting up the run with him passing. If he can get those LSU defenders out of the box, then we might see a game like South Carolina, like Ole Miss, where LSU gave up quite a few yards on the ground. They've been prone to do that against some talented running back rooms and running games. So I'll ask you guys, what unit do you trust the most on the field? Is it A&M's defense at home? I kind of lean that way in context here, but I wouldn't fault anybody for picking LSU's offense either.
I think it is Texas A&M's defense because we came into this year thinking that LSU's offense was going to be a known quantity. But when you dive into some of the deeper analytics, like you talked about, Nussmeier's got happy feet, man, and he makes a lot of throws off his back foot. He's not the most accurate passer. Now, it helps.
does too, to be fair. Wegman loves to do it too.
He absolutely does. And so I think for me, the offense almost kind of washes out. And I do trust A&M's defense more than LSU's. Tigers have made big strides over the last couple of weeks without Harold Perkins Jr., which has been really surprising. But I think you're seeing the Blake Baker effect take hold a little bit quicker than maybe we were anticipating it would in Baton Rouge, because suddenly LSU's secondary, not the liability that we once thought it was. They're getting pressure on the quarterback, and they don't have that traditional X factor like a Harold Perkins who's driving the engine. It's really just been solid play across the board for LSU. But I do find myself coming back to, I think, Texas A&M's defensive front. Hopefully they can get pressure on Nussmeier. The secondary in large quantities has held up. Now, Mississippi State threw a lot of balls underneath at them last week. I wonder if LSU attacks them the same way. But I think this probably leans more towards a defensive struggle than an all-out shootout.
Well, and what's interesting about that, Trey, what you're asking is what unit do we trust the most? We really do have strength on strength with LSU's offense versus the A&M defense, but you also have a weird symmetry on the other side of the ball. When A&M's offense and LSU's defense are out there, these are two units that have progressed a lot this year. And if you look at where they were weeks 1, week 2, week 3 versus where they are now, both units have made big strides. Now, obviously, with Connor Wigman being out for as long as he was, the strides were only so good on the A&M side. So you might see that take another leap this week, even from what you've seen the last couple of weeks, just more time in the system, more time actually playing on the field. But it's really going to be interesting to see what both of those sides can bring. Does LSU have the ability to go and stuff the run and play good in pass defense and take that next step? Or, flip side, does the A&M offense continue to run the ball well, but then find more of that intermediate passing and break some big plays over the top in the pass game? One of those things has to break, because on the other side of the ball, it's strength versus strength. Great offense, great defense, both are going to get their plays. It's more about, for me, what happens when it's the A&M offense on the field and if they can move the ball consistently.
Yeah, and why I lean A&M's defense, I think, to answer my own question, they much has been made about them giving up big plays, and that's certainly a problem. If they give up a lot of big plays in this one, could be a big problem for them against LSU because, like you said, Garrett, I don't know that the offense is really ready to keep up in a shootout, but they make up for it with the tackles for loss. Overall, they're only giving up like 4.3, I think, yards per play this year. That's plenty fine. That is more than okay. They're giving up big plays, but they're making up for it with tackles for loss. LSU's running game, it's flashed this year, but I think they really got to establish that. They can get some quick hitters for sure. They can move the ball, but if they're settling for field goals like they were against Arkansas and A&M is not turning the ball over, that could be a recipe for a loss.
Well, and you're seeing a struggle, I think, across the country for these passing offenses to convert in the red zone and to turn 3 points into 7 points consistently because it's just gotten a little bit harder to pass the ball in the red zone, whether you're watching college football or the pros. When you shrink the field, suddenly the secondary looks a whole lot more competent. And so, Trey, you mentioned the running game. Le'Veon Moss has been the bell cow for Texas A&M, but they've gotten Amari Daniels going. E.J. Smith comes in as the change of pace back. For LSU, Caden Durham, a true freshman, has really emerged as the bell cow for the Tigers. Now, I got to watch him for a number of years at Duncanville. I knew he was going to be special. Didn't know he's going to be this special this soon. But how can Texas A&M make sure that a true freshman, a very talented one, doesn't come in and beat them in their home turf?
To me, it's doing what they've been doing. They're very good schematically at stopping the run. Where they get in trouble is breaking tackles and getting juked and getting one-on-one in space. That's where we've seen the big plays on the ground against A&M when it's usually one defender, one-on-one in space. That's going to be difficult for any college defender against a talented running back or a talented skill position player. So just play sound defensive football. I don't mean to oversimplify things here, but schematically, A&M is typically in a very good place to stop the run. Don't get isolated, fill your gaps, and just do your job on defense. And I think you do a pretty good job of slowing down, not stopping completely, but slowing down LSU's run game.
If Texas A&M gets the first half performance from Connor Wegman that they saw last week against Mississippi State, if they get the Connor Wegman that showed up to the Missouri game, I do think Texas A&M wins. That being said, though, I will unashamedly emotionally hedge here. I'm going to take LSU plus the 2.5. Preseason, a lot of people were picking LSU to break this trend, to come into College Station and find a way to beat the Aggies. I will admit, I fully am on board with A&M winning this game. But boy, there is something about this LSU team that continues to defy the odds, that continues to, when everyone left them for dead, much like the Aggies after that early loss, they have quietly found ways to accumulate wins. That win over Ole Miss at home was a big deal. Now, can they follow that up? Can they follow the win up at Arkansas with what I believe is their toughest game to date in College Station? I'll take them plus the 2.5, but we'll say Texas A&M wins, LSU covers.
I'm going to take the Aggies by 2.5 here. I do think A&M covers this one. It's going to be close. I don't think they cover by a whole lot, but I do think that ultimately in a game that's so close and so evenly matched, I'm going to go with the home team and the home field advantage. I'm going to go with the the whole blackout vibes and the energy that's going to be in the crowd. I understand there's some call outs and trash talk and all that stuff. I'm not interested in that, but I am interested in the blackout and the stuff that's going to be going on around this game, the crowd energy, as well as, and this is going to be kind of my big thing right here. If you can run and keep the chains moving in this close game, I think that's what you want to do and kind of where you want to be. I trust A&M to do that right now. If there's a 3rd and 2, if there's a 3rd and 3, who do I think is going to get more of those over the course of this game? I think it's going to be A&M. It may not be by a lot, but I do think they end up getting this and find ways to convert a little bit more than LSU does. And so I am going to take A&M to cover this, maybe extend 1 or 2 more drives, score a couple more points than them, and get out of this with a win.
The stats would back you up on that, Garrett, both on offense and defense for A&M on 3rd down conversions. They were great at that, and that's why they won against Mississippi State last week and weren't really fully in trouble. I'm going to take A&M to cover as well. Going back to the offseason, A&M had 4 big home games And this was always the one I kind of circled to say, like, this is going to be the one that's most likely for A&M to win. I know LSU fans won't like it. They'll see my pennant in the background. I don't care. A&M minus 2.5. It's time to win big, and it's time to get the big win at home and prove that you belong on the national stage. It feels different this year, and I think they proved that it's different this Saturday.
One more point real quick on the conversions. I trust Connor to go pick up those extra yards if he has to scramble. Connor Wigman currently has 112 yards on the season rushing. If you look at that in the same light for Nussmeier, having played more games, he has 16. And so I'm not really going to trust Nussmeier to pick up those extra yards on the ground if it's a rollout situation, climb the pocket and scramble for it. Nussmeier just hadn't shown that he can do that. Connor's not an elite runner like Marcel Reed, his backup. However, he has shown that he can go get that first down, dive forward, and maybe hopefully avoid some injuries going forward. But he can go pick up that first down. So that's just kind of one more notch in that. I think they win the third down thing.
Nussmeier is the definition of a pocket passer. He wants to stay in there. He wants to throw off whatever platform he's going to establish. We'll wait and see. He does it off of a variety of angles, but he's a pocket passer, certainly doesn't leave very often. His offensive line's also done a good job. Now, PFF tweeted out that the LSU offensive line had not given up a sack this year. That's just blatantly wrong. They gave up 2 to South Carolina, and for everyone in the comments, it was like, well, it could have been a tight end or a running back in pass pro. No, it was against the left tackle. They got beat.
I remember distinctly watching that game thinking, oh, this is LSU's offensive line, because it was still very early on in the year.
Exactly. So anyway, Nuss has been pretty well protected throughout the season, but they're not perfect. All right, let's go to MetLife Stadium. Not a thing I expected to say in a college football show, but Notre Dame is on the road. They're 13-point favorites against number 24 Navy. The Middies are ranked. This is the 11 a.m. kick on ABC. Now, I want you to dream with me. I know Notre Dame is favored, and I know the Irish will probably win, but walk with me in a world in which Navy finds a way to win this game. Do the midshipmen then immediately become the G5 favorite for the playoff with that quality of win and the American Conference title game looming?
I think they'd have to at this point, because the only one that would have a case against that is Boise State. And I think Boise State would certainly have comparable out-of-conference wins, but Navy would have the trump card of actually winning their big game. I know we're not going to hold the Oregon game against Boise State. They played tough. It's the number 1 team in the country, obviously, but Navy won the game that was played on the field. If they can find a way to win, they're certainly the G5 playoff favorite.
Yeah, I'm with Trey. I think that's a no-brainer. I think the quality win. I do think that in this new era of expanded playoff, I think you're going to see the wins matter more than like comparing the losses, because I think once you start to, kind of dice it up in that 7-12 range, I think you have to start talking about, well, who did this team beat? Did this team prove they can beat anybody good? And if Navy can find a way to beat Notre Dame, then that's clearly best win out of any of the G5 teams right now, outside of, I guess, NIU, who's not technically competing for it. So
I know they've stumbled a couple of times. I think I know Toledo beat them last week, so maybe not even alive in the MAC race. I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to go with Navy here, plus the 13. Listen, Notre Dame does probably win this, but Navy has the 5th best offense in points per drive, 3.5. That is, like I said, 5th best. Now, Notre Dame is the 4th best defense in preventing points per drive. They're giving up 0.7 of a point statistically per drive. It's one of the most efficient offenses against one of the most efficient defenses. Now, we've also talked about Riley Leonard learning how to throw the forward pass, and Notre Dame's offense has looked a lot more dynamic since Leonard started moving down the field. Mike Denebrock has finally gotten him comfortable, and I know Notre Dame has had a lot of injuries, but boy, that engine took far longer to turn over than I think anybody really anticipated, given the hype of Leonard coming into this game. Remember when we were hyping up Notre Dame's defensive line? All the way back in week 1, that was the premier matchup. Texas A&M's Maroon Goons, can they withstand this defensive line treasure trove from the Fighting Irish? Well, they've had some injuries. They've shuffled some bodies, but they're still just 90th in tackles for loss, guys. I think there is absolutely a case where the Middies help control the line of scrimmage offensively, and maybe they turn this into a little bit of a bare-knuckled fight, and you see Navy keep it close. I think this could absolutely be a game into the fourth quarter. 13 points feels a little bit rich for me.
I am going to take Navy plus the 13 for the vibes. But I do think there's a world where Notre Dame just absolutely dominates this game, unfortunately. Navy's defense scares the crap out of me. If you look into their splits, especially against better offenses, I'm looking at the Memphis game that they pulled out late. Thinking about, I'm trying to remember the other big offense they played so far, but it's not great when they play competent offenses, and Notre Dame is teetering towards competence and will certainly have the athletic advantage in this one. Taking Navy for the vibes. Certainly think that there's an element to this game. They play every single year, and Navy loves to play this one close when they can, and they have shown that they can play it close in the not too distant past, excuse me. So, yeah, there's a world where Notre Dame runs away with this, but just for the hope, I'll take Navy.
I'm going to go 3 for 3 on this one. And I know you wrote it down, but I'm not saving the graphic on this one either, Trey. I'm going to vibe with y'all on Navy. I think this has a good chance of being a real tight game down the stretch. And it has a lot to do with the fact that I just think that Horvath is an absolute weapon. If you're kind of diving into his stats a little bit here, he's got 1,500 total yards and 20 total touchdowns. Statistically, I think he's the better quarterback coming into this game. I'm not saying he's the better pro prospect or any of that, but statistically, he's got a little bit to compete with. He's thrown a whole bunch less passes in terms of just passing, but he is completing nearly 20 yards per completion, whereas Riley Leonard's only completing about 10. So, look, in terms of being able to stretch the field a little bit, Horvath has shown it a little bit more. Yeah, smaller sample size, and maybe not quite as good a competition, but he is doing it, and he's shown that he can. I just think that when you put this on the field, I think Navy's they're going to be able to do enough offensively to keep it to where Notre Dame has to continuously, they're going to apply the pressure. Notre Dame's going to have to kind of continue to execute on the offensive side of the football. And I think they're going to fold to that once or twice. I don't think that they'll end up losing the game. I think Notre Dame should win, but I think there'll be a couple drives where the pressure gets to them a little bit. Navy might get a little bit of swell of energy and momentum, can kind of keep that thing close going into the fourth quarter. And if they keep it close, towards the end of the game, I like them to be able to hang on and kind of, tap into some of that grit and find a way to, hopefully stay close and win this one. But if not, lose this one by about, 7 points or something like that.
I think maybe the better way to phrase that quarterback comparison is that Horvath has the better grasp on his offense, right? He's more efficient in his.
He's playing better.
And if you haven't watched the Navy offense this year, it is a little different than what you might be used to. If you haven't caught a Navy game yet, they do throw a little bit more. It's still like 10 to 13 times a game max if they're wanting to do what they want, but it is airing it out just a little bit more, and executing has been the strong suit.
Yeah, they've been so opportunistic. Defense, like you said, Trey, maybe not so much. The other thing that we always worry about, even when Army and Navy aren't necessarily good, you can throw Air Force into this basket as well, having to prepare for an option attack without the bye to kind of aid you in the middle of the season, that is no easy task. And Notre Dame is coming off a 31-13 win over Georgia Tech last week. Now, that was the Haynes Kingless Georgia Tech. They bludgeoned Stanford the week before. So it's not like they've been in these strenuous, highly emotional battles, but also preparing for the option on normal week's rest, historically not the easiest thing to do. So a slight other factor going in favor of Navy. All three of us taking Navy plus the points. So congrats on Notre Dame for their 20-point cover. Number 21, Missouri, and number 15, Alabama will round out our big three. This is the 2:30 game on ABC. Guys, this line, when I wrote the preview, was Alabama minus 13.5. Since then, the announcement that Brady Cook is, quote, highly doubtful for Saturday has been released by multiple sources. And now it's up to Bama minus 17. It might have even gone even higher as we've been recording these first two games. We took it at 13.5. So as you give your picks, reference the 13.5. And I guess I'll start by saying this line feels like a trap, doesn't it? Alabama's coming off a loss. They look disoriented. They're undisciplined. The penalties have absolutely wrecked the Crimson Tide. You've got pictures of, Ryan Williams painting his nails this week. And Quotes like guys are more interested in TikTok. Was that Kirk Herbst? No. Greg McElroy said that the program is more interested in TikTok than they are in winning football games. All of the noise would have you leaning in favor of Missouri to win this or to cover, maybe even win Tuscaloosa. I feel like this is just the world's largest trap game. So I've been wrong every time I've tried to outsmart the trap, outsmart the line. I'm just going to go with gut intuition on this one and say I feel like Alabama figures something out and they win by 14 plus.
Without Brady Cook, it's hard to see a path to victory for Mizzou. That offense was disgusting and even worse than it had been when Drew Pine was in. The Drew Pine experience in Tuscaloosa is not really something that I want to put my hard-earned American currency on. But I also don't think I can confidently say Alabama is going to go out and dominate an SEC football team at this point right now. I took Mizzou plus the points before the quarterback switch. I'm going to roll with it. I'm going to stay, especially if you give me the 16.5 or 17-point line. I just don't trust Alabama to play cohesive, complementary football right now. They've got to show it to me. If their defense is doing great, their offense can't move the ball and take advantage of the other team's mistakes. Mm-hmm. If their offense is doing great, their defense can't get off the field on third down. They're not playing good complementary football right now. They feel like two separate teams, depending on who has the ball. So until I see it, I'm going to take them to not just absolutely destroy an SEC football team. Mizzou's defense has looked improved over the last couple of weeks. I know they got blitzed against A&M, but looked better against Auburn. The defense stood tall when they needed to hold that win down. And the defense, I think, can maybe disrupt Alabama a little bit and keep this a little bit closer.
Yeah, I was getting ready to just vibes pick this game and just say, all right, look, Alabama, the vibes are terrible. They've lost a couple games. Everybody's complaining. Missouri, they need this, right? They're coming off a big comeback win where, Cook gets knocked out. He's a tough guy. He comes back in after hospital tests, and I'm sure we're going to see a whole 30 for 30 on that one. I think they even said they were going to put it in a little video. So, I was getting ready to talk about, Brady Cook showed something to the locker room. They're going to be fired up this week, ready to go. They're going into Tuscaloosa. They got all the momentum on their side, playing with house money. And I'm throwing all that out the window because Brady Cook's not playing. And that was my vibes. My vibes were all around, Brady Cook kind of as the linchpin of all the energy and momentum and all the vibes there. And if he can't play, then he can't play. Now, I'll tell you this. If Cook goes, I know he said doubtful, he's not out. But if Cook goes, then I'm picking Missouri to cover and possibly win this one, because I think that this is the week where if Brady Cook can play and can actually be healthy, I think this offense is so ready to break out. I think it's a, Luther Burden legacy type game. And I think that that's where they go. But because I don't think he's going to play and because he is doubtful, I'm going to roll with the Tide. I don't really think that there's a case to be made for why they're great, but Missouri without Brady Cook is not great. And I'm gonna roll with the Tide. I'm gonna roll with Milroe and Ryan Williams and all them to just be better athletes than what Missouri can put against them, and find a way to cover that spread.
Trey, last week we said that it was an elimination game in Knoxville. I still firmly believe that, but play this game with me. If Alabama wins, it means what? If Missouri loses, it means what?
If Alabama wins, it means their hopes are hanging on by a thread and depend on them being able to win in Baton Rouge in a couple of weeks. If Missouri wins, they're all of a sudden in the driver's seat for a playoff, because if they can win in Tuscaloosa, it's hard to see a world where they're not 11-1 with the schedule that they have down the stretch. I know Arkansas will be tough. I know no SEC game you can just chalk up to a victory, but the meat of their schedule will be well past them, and they 11-1 would be on the table.
I think at South Carolina, so their remaining schedule, just for those of you playing at home against Oklahoma, that's looking like maybe the softest game on their schedule remaining. And I do not say that facetiously. At South Carolina, at Mississippi State, home against Arkansas. I think stock slightly more up on South Carolina and Mississippi State over these last couple of weeks.
South Carolina has to actually win games, though. Like we're stock high on them because they play good teams close,
yes,
and almost win, but they actually have to win a game.
They're
I would actually stock higher on Mississippi State if we're making that argument, because I think Van Buren's done something for that offense.
I agree. I think South Carolina is an elite defensive team. And if they had a halfway competent offense, I think this is a team that is, a 9-10 win team. But that's really not been the case so far. I agree. Mississippi State certainly seems like they're headed in the right direction. They stopped A&M, who was trying to rush the ball down their throats last week. Trey, that was one of our keys to that game was A&M, I believe you said, should be able to name their rushing total. They were stuffed for at least for the first half.
They had some big runs called back by some questionable holding calls.
They did. They did. But the plays that stood, props to Mississippi State. There are a lot of steps that the Bulldogs took last week. So anyway, all of that to say, Missouri it's felt like since they got just waxed by the Aggies in College Station that Missouri's an afterthought to the playoff. That's very much not the case. If they can win in Tuscaloosa, if they can find a way to navigate a couple of tricky road games at South Carolina, Mississippi State, you're right. Missouri will not only have a chance at a playoff, but probably kind of a right to one of those at-large bids. And, who knows? Who knows what happens in the SEC standings? We got a lot of ball to play still, and one loss in the conference certainly does not eliminate you from getting to Atlanta. All right, let's go ahead and move into our Saturday storylines. These are presented by Baller Pickleball. 3Tech Pod is the code that you can use to get off 10% your entire order. Let's start in the Big Ten, guys. And easily the headline here almost made our big three is number 20, Illinois at number 1, Oregon. The Ducks are 21.5-point favorites as we record this. This is a 2:30 p.m. kick. As I dove into this was another line that I feel like is a little bit of a trap, but I feel like it's begging you to take Illinois plus the points. And there are a couple reasons for that. Number one, Luke Altmaier, after going 13-10 in touchdowns to interception ratio last season and really being a walking turnover, he is the best touchdown to interception ratio in the country this year. He's 15-1 when it comes to putting the ball in the end zone. The Illini are giving up just 60% completion through the air. Good news if you're facing a team that passes the ball like Oregon does. And I will say, when you go into the analytics and you look at scoring defenses and time of possession and third down conversions, Illinois is a lot closer to what Oregon does than I would have originally thought. So maybe this is, once again, I'm not learning my lesson. I'm going to lean right into this trap. But I had a really hard time finding a way from what we've seen on the field where Oregon covers this game comfortably. Oregon has not covered the vast majority of their games this season, while Illinois is 3-1 as an outright underdog.
I do think Oregon's peaking at the right time. They are starting to kind of play better football, and they're looking a lot better. I think, winning versus Ohio State can help do that. That can energize your team and help you think that you can play better. And I know that they played a garbage Purdue team last week, so that, kind of helps pad your stats. They didn't even give up 100 passing yards. That's, pretty solid. But I do think that Dylan Gabriel is the difference here. He's too good at this point. He's thrown for over 2,000 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 77% completions. Not only are the Illini giving up 60%, but it's 77% for Dylan Gabriel on the year. I think he's going to be able to complete a lot of passes. He's going to be able to, figure out how to navigate this defense. They're going to be able to score a bunch, and I do think that defense is starting to play better and round into form a little bit. I'm going to pick the Ducks to cover. I know it seems like a massive number, but I just think they're playing really good football right now.
Give me Illinois in the points. I think this is a little bit of a sleepy game for Oregon, probably the biggest game left on their schedule in the regular season. But you're right, Mitch, they're 3-4 against the spread this year. Haven't done well as a massive favorite against the spread, Purdue notwithstanding. But I think Illinois can do enough to ugly up a game. And even if Oregon wins this comfortably, like in the 14 to 17 point range, it wouldn't surprise me if Illinois was hanging tough around halftime and making that cover really difficult for Oregon.
Well, we've talked about Illinois. They're a legit threat in the passing game. They aren't the juggernaut on the defensive side, specifically in the front four that we're kind of used to Illinois being over the last couple of seasons. But offensively, they've really found their stride, and it's been through the air, not on the ground. I think they give the Ducks secondary a little bit of a test this weekend. Should be a fun one. Again, that's a 2:30 p.m. kick in the Big Ten. Elsewhere around the conference, you've got Washington at number 13, Indiana, Nebraska at number 4, Ohio State. And number 3, Penn State on the road at Wisconsin. Trey, of those 3 games, you can only pick one to have on the TV. Which is it?
I'm going Penn State, Wisconsin, man. I almost texted you guys earlier this week to do a little vibe check on the Badgers because a lot of people wrote them off, myself included, after Tyler Van Dyke went down in the Alabama loss, and the Alabama game really got away from them after that. But they've quietly put together a competent little run here, playing in Madison, 6.5-point dog at night. I mean, Penn State, have they really been outright tested yet? I know they played USC. I know they played Illinois, but Wisconsin on the road is going to be the toughest road game that they've faced so far, and could get a little spicy in Madison. I'm kind of excited for this one.
Well, and it's a 6.5-point spread. I'll tell you, where we didn't see Penn State dominate was in the line of scrimmage against USC. They got pushed around defensively, right? This is a team that you're used to at least being in the top 5 of total rushing defense. They did not look like that against Woody Marks and that USC offensive line, which at times has been questioned for their physicality this season. I wonder if Wisconsin is built to specifically win, or at least keep it close against a team like Penn State. Tawee Walker has had a great season, and you're right, Braden Locke has certainly come on and into his own. I think this game being at home is a massive advantage for the Badgers. I like them to cover this spread and keep it really interesting.
Yeah, our friends at College Football Insiders have this as a 3.8-point spread in favor of Penn State. So, like I said, could get really, really spicy in Madison.
Garrett, out of Washington and Indiana, Nebraska to Ohio State, do you have a leaning on either of those 2 games?
I'd rather watch Washington, Indiana. I think that's just going to be the more fun game to watch. Indiana absolutely rolling right now. Washington a little bit better on defense than you might think, but I still think Indiana's probably rolling, and I want to see them kind of beat up another team. It's been fun to watch this offense go, and I think at this point they're one of those teams that a lot of us can kind of root for across the country and just say, yeah, this is our little, darling team over here on the side. I know it was Trey's actual darling, but, college football has kind of, adopted them, put our arms around them, figuratively speaking, and said, come on, Indiana, you can do it. Find your way up to the top. Make the playoff, please.
Couple of notes for the Hoosiers. Obviously, Curtis Rourke is out this week, but it's hypothesized that he could be back even as soon as next week. So that thumb injury maybe not as serious as we originally worried when he exited the Nebraska game. Taven Jackson will be the starting quarterback for the Hoosiers this week.
Mitch, I'm just speculating here. I'm wondering if he'll even be available in an emergency role this week, because
pinch hit off the bench.
If things are going awry a little bit, like they've already announced that he's going to be good to go for November 2nd. So you just don't typically see that 2 weeks out, but I'm just speculating here, but I'm wondering if things go awry a little bit, if he could come in off the bench.
It's like playoff baseball, man. Like everybody's got their cleats on in an elimination game. Indiana would love to keep it rolling. Their offense, when healthy, 48.7 points per game. Washington scoring just 24 points per game. We did not expect the bludgeoning that the Cornhuskers allowed last week. We expected Nebraska to give them a real test. I mean, I don't remember the exact splits on that pick, but there was some real debate between the two, between the 3 of us, I should say, on if Indiana would be able to cover, if Nebraska would keep it close. Washington, Garrett, as you mentioned, statistically, the top passing defense in the country. They've only given up 5 touchdowns through the air, so that's certainly something to keep an eye on. And then for Indiana,
that number is going up for sure.
I would tend to agree.
Going up pretty high.
On the ground for Indiana, I think maybe where this game ends up tilting is Justin Ellison and Tyson Lawton. They may be asked to carry even more of the load. Now they're averaging 202 yards on the ground anyway. But when you kind of stack everything up against each other, Washington has been fun, but we saw their defense completely fall apart against Iowa. I expect some of the same, maybe not to that degree, but I do expect Indiana to find a way to pull away at home this week. I'll also take Ohio State minus whatever. I'm kind of out on Nebraska being a competent football team right now. The cracks are there. Do I still believe that they're building to something? Absolutely. But Matt Rule, maybe he is who we thought he was. We should have pumped the brakes just a little bit on a freshman quarterback and a team learning how to win.
Are we going to get another situation like we did last year with Nebraska, where they're just stuck on 5 wins?
No,
forever?
no.
I hope not.
No,
Man, that'd be unfortunate.
those poor people deserve a bowl game. I will stand on the table for them to get postseason football for the first time since I don't even know when their last time they went to a bowl game was.
2016 is the last time they made a bowl game. I'm pulling up their schedule right now.
It's Ohio State, UCLA, at USC, Wisconsin, and at Iowa.
Yeah,
So it is not a for sure thing.
UCLA should be a win.
It should be.
Home,
You're right
but
about
UCLA looked competent last
They looked
week
a
for
little
the
better.
first time this year against Rutgers last week.
They looked a little better.
Man, my chop wood, carry water campaign has died. That stinks for Rutgers. Speaking of Rutgers, they're on the road taking on USC. That is going to be a brutal game, I think.
Do you think they caught the same returning flight with UCLA just so they could be in town?
Maybe.
Great question. Maybe
the charger there.
Conference saving a buck or two.
Yeah, let's just share the plane.
Hey, at non-scholarship sports or lower level sports, that's exactly what's happening. A lot of buses and planes being shared. I'll tell you what. Michigan State and Michigan, the Wolverines are 3.5-point favorites in the battle for Paul Bunyan's axe. Yeah, Trey, for those of you
more like Paul Bunyan's, never mind.
For those of you on the podcast side, Trey is really not looking forward to this game. I'm going to take Michigan State. I think their defense might find a way to win. This is a rivalry game. You throw the records out. Dare I say what little Michigan State has coaxed out of their offense might be better than what the Wolverines have?
You don't trust the three-headed quarterback monster, and they're all actually the same person, just with different flaws. I'm leaning towards Michigan. Michigan State has better vibes right now, at least offensively.
Which is a wild statement.
That's an awful statement if you're a Michigan fan. What's the line on this one? 3.5. Michigan at home. Yeah, give me Michigan State to cover that.
Yeah, I'd also probably go Michigan State. The Michigan quarterback situation is like that meme with all the dragon heads where it's like there's the two regular looking ones and then there's a goofy looking one on the side. Except in this case, they're all goofy looking. It's just 3 goofy looking dragons. Right now, I went team totals real quick. They are completing 61% as a team. They have not thrown for 1,000 yards as a team this season. They have 6 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. They have a higher interception percent than touchdown percent. Oh, well.
Sometimes math makes this really easy. Michigan has 2 wins over Power 4 competition at home this year, both by 3 points. Spread is 3.5 points. Take the dog.
There it is, math. Let's go over to the SEC. Number 5, Texas on the road at number 25, Vanderbilt. Hello.
A number.
Doors Nation. It's good to have you back amongst the ranked.
First time in 11 years they've had that little number next to them.
How about that? Good for the Doors. Listen, I think Texas wins this game. I did put in our run sheet. Do you expect a Texas hangover or a get-right week as the more likely outcome? We know Vanderbilt's offense is hell on wheels. We know it's very difficult to play against no matter how athletic and prepared your offense is. Still, I lean towards Texas as long as they have a healthy quarterback. I don't know if Quinn is fully healthy or not. I anticipate that he's mostly healthy and he'll get the start again. He did come back against Georgia. I tend to lean Texas figuring some things out. Whether they cover or not in this game, I haven't the foggiest idea, but I will take the Texas Longhorns to win this one. And I'll say maybe it's thin ice at times, but in the end, I don't think there's a doubt.
Let me paint a picture for you guys.
Please do.
It is 10-3 Vanderbilt at the end of the first quarter.
Oh, gosh.
And Quinn Ewers has thrown an interception. Who's taking the first snap of quarterback in the second
Arch Manning
for Texas?
Trey Wisner. We're going
Trey Wisner.
Going wild Longhorn there.
I'm surprised you think in that scenario they make it to the half without trying to switch quarterbacks.
I said second quarter.
Yeah. Oh, so I thought you said second half. Okay.
No, second quarter. Yeah.
I was like, that's no points.
I tried to make it a little more difficult on you by saying second quarter. Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think Arch, that we didn't really get to talk about it a ton, but it was a really, really interesting decision by Sark to put Arch in when he did, trying to get a spark. I get it. Didn't work. And we'll see how that will. It's just something to monitor down the stretch. I'm not hitting the panic alarm. I'm not telling Texas fans to say that they have a massive quarterback controversy. They're doing that enough by themselves, but something to monitor. And I think Vanderbilt can cover this game. It seems like the Magic's going to run out at some point, doesn't it? But against the spread this year, guys, Vanderbilt is 1-2 as a favorite. As an outright dog, they are 4-1 straight up, and all of those wins have come as a double-digit dog. So take them to cover. Like that feels like the trends are going to tell you to take it to cover at least.
Congratulations to Georgia State on a win over the eventual SEC champ Vanderbilt Commodores.
Yeah,
man, that is just crazy. Isn't Vanderbilt coming out of a bye on this one?
No, they played Ball State last week.
Who's coming out of the bye this? I don't remember who's coming out of the bye this week. Either way, Vanderbilt. That's right. It's basically a bye because they're playing Ball State.
They struggled with
they did struggle a little bit, but it was a
10-point win, sir.
I think that was a look ahead, just by the way.
Absolutely,
that's why, because they weren't prepping for Ball State.
And to be fair, Texas' loss was probably a look ahead as well.
They were looking ahead to Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
No, but I think that was a prep for Ball State for a couple of days, and then let's go on to Texas prep before the game week is completely finished there. Look, I think Vanderbilt's a lot better than we thought they were. I don't think that they have what it takes to win this game, but that is a little bit of a lean back and a side eye, because I do think there's a reality where Vanderbilt can find a way to win this game. Nobody would have thought they could have beat Bama. They found a way to do it. Now, I don't think Bama's all that good this year, so that kind of puts the kibosh on that one. But I still think that Texas should win this game. I just don't think it's going to be close. It shouldn't be close by the end of it. But this is massive caveat. This is when we learn about Texas as a team, right? We used to say, and this was what happened with Alabama, was when an Alabama team would go and beat you and you had aspirations and then they went and beat you, there was something called the Alabama effect, where the next week you would drop a game you really had no business dropping. We can call it the Georgia effect this year if we want to, and Georgia's been the better team the last couple weeks, but they just got beat in a big-time spot, emotionally draining. Everybody in the entire universe was in Austin for that game. How do they handle going on the road to a competent Vanderbilt team in a letdown spot, right, where you're drained, hard to get up? It's that weird, lazy 3:15 in the afternoon slot. So, it's not first games. It's kind of that after the 2:30 kicks have happened anyways. This is going to be where we find out about Texas as a team and what they're made of, because this is a spot where a lot of SEC teams have figured out in the past, you don't just win these games with no effort. I think Texas will take care of business. I do think that they'll cover this one. But I think there's a real scenario where they come in here and we find out, they weren't ready for this, and Vanderbilt ends up keeping this one close, maybe even winning.
I looked at the availability report for the Longhorns. They're not as beat up as maybe I would have thought for that storyline, but Makuba's doubtful, the defensive back. Bond is questionable, and then Wisner is probable. So, maybe if Texas is more full steam, maybe they can avoid that Georgia effect, but, we'll see. The rest of the SEC slate, guys, really, really sad. Oklahoma's a dumpster fire. They fired Seth Luttrell. They take on Ole Miss this week. Arkansas, Mississippi State, it's kind of the battle of the SEC hopefuls, like which program is on the faster track to rebuild mode. Arkansas looked really kind of helpless last week. Now, I don't think Taylon Green was full health. He was kind of hobbling around out there.
He kind of did what he's done all year, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah. You want to blame it on health, but even when he was healthy, he was kind of doing similar things.
I think this line is 6.5 in favor of the Razorbacks. I'll tell you, put your money on Mississippi State. They just feel like they're headed in the right direction, and eventually they've got to win one of these games.
Yeah,
right? They have to beat one of these teams. It feels like
I think they're going to beat Arkansas. I'll just call it outright. I think Van Buren's been on a hot streak. I really like this spot for Mississippi State. This is at Mississippi State too, right? That's. I think this is a big spot for them. Yeah. I think they'll win this game.
Yeah, it's at home. Eventually, the Cowbells have got to win one of them. Auburn at Kentucky, that is a gross game.
If you're
Neither
not a
team
fan
has
of one of those
offense.
teams and you find yourself watching that game, you have
Yeah.
You need to
serious
rethink your
questions.
life if you're going to watch that game.
Yeah, that's one of the circles of Dante's Inferno is watching Auburn
I
at
was going to say
Kentucky.
that might end up in like stuck in the fourth screen of your quad box because the other three games are really good and you just can't switch it off of that one. But that's about the only reason you should be watching this game.
It's probably true. Over to winning football. Let's talk ACC storylines, guys. We've got the 22nd ranked SMU Mustangs, a little low in the poll, it feels like, for the success that they've had. They're 11.5-point favorites at Duke, 7 o'clock on Saturday night. It was announced that RJ Maryland, the dynamic tight end for the Ponies, is out after suffering an injury. I guess it was a shoulder injury or something like that against Stanford. Duke, though, has a top 20 scoring defense. They're giving up just 17 points per game. They're going to get their biggest test of the season, I think, against SMU. The Mustangs and Kevin Jennings scoring 40 per contest. Do you have a leaning in this game? Again, SMU, 11.5-point favorites.
I am. It's such a big spread on the road for SMU. That's really tough. But do we trust the Duke offense to keep up here? Because they've been winning a lot of games defensively. And I just don't know that you can do that against SMU. So I'm kind of leaning SMU reluctantly if I had to pick this game, but it's going to be really interesting to see how that SMU offense, if they can still put up points without their safety blanket.
I'm going to confidently chest out say that SMU covers this. I do think that Duke is a better team than we're giving them credit for, but I dug into it a little bit. I'm still trying to figure out who their best win this season is. Is it UConn? Like they've played Elon, Northwestern, UConn, Middle Tennessee, North Carolina, and Florida State. They won all those games. They did lose to Georgia Tech. So, like, who's the best team on that? Like, I don't know that they've beaten anybody. They certainly haven't played an offense with much of a pulse. So, obviously Georgia Tech, probably the best of those offenses, and they lost that game. They lose that game 24-14. So I think with a team with a pulse here with SMU, I know that it's on the road, maybe a tough spot, and a better defense than we're probably giving them credit for. But I do think that's maybe more of a product of their schedule than it is just Duke being a juggernaut defensively. I am going to take SMU to cover this and win this one pretty big.
I mean, I think Duke's pretty solid defensively. Again, yeah, they haven't played anybody tremendous, but just from a Jimmy's and Joe's standpoint, they've been taking care of business. What returners they did have on that defensive line have played really well this year. I'm with Trey, though. I lean the offense not being able to keep up. SMU can hurt you in a variety of ways. I'll take the Ponies to cover this one on the road. Maybe it's close for most of the game, but I like SMU to find a way to win it by 2 full scores. Give me SMU by 14. Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech. Again, I mentioned Haynes King is out likely this week as well. I think it's the Zach Pylon show. Didn't exactly go great against Notre Dame. Virginia Tech is 10.5-point favorites. Now, I want to toss this to you guys because on one of the Sirius XM shows this week, I heard that they were talking about Virginia Tech like, hey, guys, jump back on the bandwagon. It's time to reinvest in the Hokies. I don't necessarily know if I believe in that narrative or not.
I believe in the schedule of Virginia Tech, and that's what I believed in Virginia Tech all offseason. I think I believe in Bishan Tutton too. He's looked fantastic in the last couple of games, but the schedule down the stretch is Georgia Tech at Syracuse, Clemson at home, at Duke, and at home against Virginia. So other than the Clemson game, in a vacuum, you'd probably pick the Hokies in all of those. Maybe Syracuse could be a little plucky on the road, but if you're going to buy stock, it seems like a good time.
Yeah, it's a soft close. I mean, I might be tempted to lean Syracuse in that game, but I could agree with you on the rest of them.
I just don't, aside from their rushing attack, which has been amazing with Tootin. Bashal has, what has he done? He's got 871 yards so far on the ground. He's got 12 touchdowns. Kyron Drones has kicked in another 318 on the ground. 9 touchdowns and 5 picks, though, for Kyron. He hasn't been as dynamic through the air as I was kind of hoping he would be this season.
That was never the recipe for them, though, was it?
Well, it was. I thought he was going to be a little bit more of an aerial threat. I mean, when he got to Baylor out of Shadow Creek, like he was supposed to be the next guy to run, Baylor's spread offense. So he's got the ability to do it. Ali Jennings out wide for them. I mean, they've got some pieces. I thought they were going to throw the ball around a little bit more than they have this year. They looked good against Boston College and Stanford. Obviously, they played a nearly complete game against Miami. I don't know. Maybe it's kind of my refusal just to hop back on the bandwagon, but I don't know that they're as special as I thought they were. Certainly, they're not as special as I thought they were in the preseason. I think they win this game and they probably cover this game. But as far as those are a couple of plucky teams. They got to go to Syracuse, as you guys mentioned. JMA Wireless Dome, not an easy place to play. They also have to play at Duke. Like, we'll just see. We'll just see. But if I had to push currency around the board, I don't know that I'd be doing it for Virginia Tech. Maybe I'm going to be wrong. We'll see. We talked about Syracuse and Pitt on our Monday show. If you haven't heard that, you want to hear our breakdown of that game, go listen. Just actually the previous episode in the podcast feed. You'll find that. Anything else stand out to you guys in the ACC slate? I mean, FSU at Miami is such a sad game now. That was supposed to be a classic preseason, and now the Noles are 1-6.
Yeah, that was supposed to be his first spot in the ACC title game, most likely, and here we are.
That was going to be, Florida supremacy and who's going to rule recruiting, and now Miami finds himself a 21-point favorite. And that was actually the game that I locked up this week in the ledger because I just don't see how Florida State keeps it close, especially with some of that Miami home cooking on the referee side of things.
The only way Florida State keeps it close is because Miami loves to play close games, and
that might be it.
The chaos factor.
North Carolina, Virginia is a little intriguing to me. I'm still interested in what Virginia can do the rest of this year.
Go Hoos.
Louisville trying to bounce back against Boston College. Yeah, I'm digging deep here, guys. There was a Pac-12 game that snuck into this list somehow, Oregon State and Cal, but that's an ACC game.
That's right. ACC on the West Coast. Oregon State, by the way, the top team in the country in time of possession. There's your water cooler stat of the week.
There you go.
So Cal lost to NC State. Did they not last week? I don't know that I like the Bears. I think the Calgary might be dead, guys. Over to the Big 12. 2 games to talk about here, Cincinnati and Colorado. The Buffs suddenly can jaunt right into the thick of the Big 12 title discussion, maybe even get one of the inside tracks to Arlington with a win over Cincinnati, who is also currently alive for the conference race.
Yeah, and Colorado, another team that loves to play close games. Neither one of these teams really seems interested in running the ball. Brendan Sorsby, one of the most underrated quarterbacks in college football this year, but he's been slumping a little bit lately. I lean Colorado at home. 5 is a weird number, just notoriously. I hate games with a 5 or a 4-point spread. It's just so weird, but I think Colorado has just a little bit too much talent, and Cincinnati's kind of built their resume on the lower half of the Big 12. So big gut check for them. Give me Colorado at home.
And at altitude and at 9:15 at night. It's just not a great spot for Cincinnati. I do think they'll be able to hang in this one. I think it's going to be just a sling fest. I think they're going to be throwing it up and down the field and a bunch of points. But you're probably right that, Colorado finds a way to score a couple more touchdowns in this one. Maybe pull away late where it's, a drive at the end of the game to put this thing on ice, win by 10, something like that.
This game might take 4.5 hours to complete with the number of passes that both.
Yeah, this is definitely our watch it with us during the live stream special. So when y'all come back for that live stream, come watch that game with us as well. We'll be watching, the second quarter of that when we go live.
Yeah, no kidding. I made that graphic, the come and take it graphic for Sparky last week, and then they announced that Jeff Sims was the quarterback. I don't think he turned the ball over. I don't remember seeing a turnover in his ledger, but certainly didn't do anything to move the offense forward. So Cincinnati, unfortunately, taking one of our darlings away from us. BYU, 11th ranked in the country. They're on the road in a tricky spot in the bounce house. UCF is favored by 2. I think the reason why is because Ja'Cory Brown and the offense figured some things out last week. They looked impressive against Iowa State, really found a way to lose that one late. But guys, a concerning tweet that I saw that I don't know if it had legitimacy or not, but there have been real rumors that the locker room there in Orlando has been lost and that Gus Malzahn just does not have control of the players anymore. There were some tweets going around that players, when asked, hey, how do we feel about the BYU game, were saying they're kind of looking forward to the after parties after, more so than playing the football game. That's concerning when you have this many guys announcing they're going to the transfer portal before the season's over. I'll take BYU as the underdog on the road here.
Well, and that's just because they're looking forward to partying with all the missionaries that come down for the game, and I can't blame them either. So that'll be the fun storyline, I guess, for them. No, I don't think that UCF's going to be able to have consistent success against the BYU zone defense. They play a lot of zone defense. They like to keep everything in front of them. If you're asking me, can UCF consistently pass against that, hit big shots over the top, or run against it? Running against zone, pretty tough to do. I just don't believe it. And we've seen the fight and the effort out of BYU so far this year. I'm obviously going to stand here and continue to stomp my foot for BYU on this podcast, but I will do it again. I think BYU wins a pretty big one here.
Yeah, there are some holes in that BYU run defense. So, and we all know that UCF's bread and butter is running the ball. Mitch, you mentioned the offense got right last week. They got right behind the 65 passing yards and 345 rushing yards against Iowa State. So kudos to them for running that well. But, defensively, BYU's been known to bust some coverages in the run game. 228 yards against Kansas State, 269 yards last week against Oklahoma State. So that's the recipe for UCF. No idea what's going on in the locker room. Obviously, that's a big wild card, but just a weird line. And you know what we like to do with weird lines.
That's right. Steer right into them. Elsewhere in the Big 12, Texas Tech and TCU play for what's that rivalry called? I know it's the Battle of the Cactus on Twitter, but is it the battle for the Saddle Tramp? What is that? It is a rivalry game.
It's the battle for convince me there's still rivalries in the Big 12. That's what it is.
Oh no, that rivalry is very much alive. Those
that
two
one's hot. Yeah, I didn't know it had a name though.
I think each NIL program was basically launched in spite of the other school. I like West Virginia going on the road to beat Arizona this week. Although Neil Brown, what are you doing, man? He gets in front of the podium for his media availability. I believe it was today, maybe from Monday, and says, yeah, we're actually glad to be going on the road. We've had so many home games in a row. We'll be on the road for now the next month. We just kind of need a break. I mean, nothing deflates the air out of the room more than saying, yeah, home fans, we really don't want to see y'all.
Yeah. Wow.
I guess
I don't really know what to say to that.
No, because you can't sing Country Roads Take Me Home unless you're playing on the road, right? So that's what he's saying. There's no use in singing Take Me Home if you've been at home.
Sure.
I'm just trying to save them here.
Hell of a way to spin that.
Look, this is spin season. It's election cycles. I'm just trying to find a way to save Neil Brown.
That's right.
Texas Tech TCU is the battle for the saddle, apparently, guys. I
battle for the saddle.
Did Google and verify that.
There you go. Kansas versus Kansas State, Sunflower Showdown as well.
Baby.
That one doesn't feel like it means as much, but then again, we may be talking about Kansas on a out of nowhere upset win on
Garrett. You had them preseason winning this game. What are your thoughts?
Nice question.
Yeah, they've been bad this year.
They have been much worse than anticipated.
It's so sad, and it's literally Jeff Grimes.
I should have known. I just believed in those players, and I shouldn't have believed in the players because I believed in the players before when it comes to Jeff Grimes. That wasn't good enough then either. So
truly, we're all trying to figure out who did this meme, and it's Jeff Grimes.
Jeff Grimes is wearing a hot dog suit.
Trey, take us home here on the G5 storylines. We've got Memphis and Tulane kind of in interesting games. I think Tulane certainly might be on upset alert. You've got fun games in the Sun Belt, out west, in the Mountain West. What catches your eye from a loaded G5 schedule?
Yeah, you guys might need to make a little drive up 35 to Denton for that Tulane UNT game. Could be really interesting. Could be a lot of points scored in that game. I think Tulane's still clinging to some playoff hope. Both of their losses are to power conference teams. Obviously, the Oklahoma loss is not aging super well, but Kansas State, there's no shame in that. That was a close game as well. We've got Memphis, Charlotte this week. Should be a lot of points. James Madison, just so disappointing that they lost to Sunbelt East leading Georgia Southern, but still a very disappointing loss. And I mean, the highlight is really Friday night. We talked about it on the Monday show. Boise, UNLV. Clear your schedule Friday night for that one because it's going to be a lot of fun.
Ooh, get-in price at DACU Stadium is $26 on SeatGeek. So
that'll come down. That'll probably come down.
I'll tell you what, that is tempting. Except I think I have a gathering on Saturday morning. So
is it homecoming or is that something that I'm making up? I thought I'd seen something about the coach criticizing people for not coming out for homecoming or something like that.
Because it's an 11 a.m. game. I think you're right.
I'm just like, why would you not show up for Tulane? It's homecoming. It's a big deal. Why would you not show up for this? Well,
I think his issue is he wants homecoming at a different time, not 11. Just because.
Well, but I thought he complained about like, hey, if you want to do it at whatever time, go back to the whatever it was, the Southland or the whatever. And just kind of just trying to like criticize people for that. He's like, we show up, we play. This is da-da-da.
Reminding people that UNT's athletic department is funded through this TV contract that puts them on at 11 a.m.
Like, hey, if you want that kind of thing, we can go back and do that. But instead, we're here to show up to the game. I don't blame him because I know from a few people that I know up at UNT or who have been up at UNT, they cannot get support on campus for this football team, and it's got to be infuriating having a good season. You lose a couple games you don't necessarily feel too bad about, and you got a good season going. Like, go out and support Mean Green.
Yeah, no, it's a fun team. The offense is one of the best in the country. The defense needs a whole lot of work, but hey, at least they're not historically bad, so we'll give them that. We talked about Boise and UNLV on the Friday night. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then, Louisiana on a bye this week. They only have one loss. I feel like it's just like you mentioned, it's easy to kind of forget that Georgia Southern is suddenly in the driver's seat in the East. Like Louisiana is right there as well. They've looked decent.
Louisiana's loss was to Tulane, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And it was a close game until the end. I think they lost by 10, but Ben Woolridge has looked pretty explosive on the offensive side for the Raging Cajuns.
Yeah, I'd certainly have them as the favorite in the Sun Belt right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get out of here on that exciting week 9 ahead. We're pumped to watch it with you. Again, follow us on Twitter, Instagram at 3TechPod for your Saturday storylines. Trey releases that every single Saturday morning. We're looking forward to a loaded slate of football. And, of course, we'll be breaking it all down live on Saturday night. You can find us on the YouTube channel, on Twitter, on Instagram Live as well. We'll be breaking down all the stories and headlines from Week 9. Until that Saturday live show, for Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.
Gracious, how about